This is Paul from Injector Dynamics, and I want to show you how to use our online calculators to generate the appropriate data to update the ECU so that you get results you're looking for. Good throttle response, proper air fuel ratios, that type of thing. So we're going to start at the Injector Dynamics website, injectordynamics.com, not hard to find. Under products, go to UTV products, Honda, and then if we scroll down, we get to, well, maybe I scrolled too far. There we go. I did scroll too far. DynoJet Honda Talon Pioneer Data Generator works on both of those vehicles, the Talon and the Pioneer. So this is the tool that we're going to use to make the corrections in the ECU. And the goal of this, of course, is to be able to take, let's just say, for instance, a stock vehicle, put in a bigger set of injectors, maybe a different fuel type, whatever the case may be, put them in and hit the key and have the car run and be drivable. Now, I'm not going to say that if you do this, it doesn't require any tuning. That would be crazy. What it does is get it close enough that everything is going to function correctly. Drivability will be fine. You can run it on the dyno without worry about being too lean or something like that. So this is going to get you in the ballpark, and it's also going to correct a lot of I shouldn't say correct. It's going to account for a lot of complexity in the stock ECU. In fact, we've got to update 46 tables in the software to make this work. But between this calculator and a couple of functions built into the DynoJet software, it's actually quite simple. So I'm going to show you how. Let's start. So first thing is, this is set up into two different configurations. So the first thing we have to do is define the current configuration. Now in this case, we're going to assume that it's a completely stock vehicle or stock injectors in it. So we have to choose the injector model. We'll choose Talon, of course, since that's the example that I'm using. Fuel pressure. Let's say you have a stock fuel system. Not necessarily recommended, but good enough for the sake of the explanation here. 49.8 psi. It's already populated with that value, which is the stock fuel pressure. Now we have to choose the fuel type. So the first selection here is a gasoline ethanol mix, which is common in pump gas. Pump gas typically contains about 10% ethanol, but we can move this number around to whatever it may be. Maybe you're using some flex fuel and or an E85 from the pump, and you tested it and you say, well, it's 30%. You can enter that value. Or if you're using race fuel from a drum, maybe VP X85, for instance, and you know that that's 85%, I would recommend not using the slider. Just punch in the actual number. Now, as it says here in the notes, stoichiometric air fuel ratio is not something you need to worry about for gasoline or ethanol. That's only for the custom fuel. Fuel density, you don't have to worry about that. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later, but for now, we'll leave it at that. So we've defined the Honda Talon injector at 49.8 psi because we've got a stock fuel system, 10% fuel, which is pump gas, which is what the vehicle was calibrated for. Now we have to go on and define the new configuration. So let's just say that you put a set of 1050s in there because you're going to put a turbocharger, supercharger, something like that. And if you're using one of our return style fuel systems, your fuel pressure would be 3 bar, which is 43.5 psi. So we'll enter that directly. And instead of choosing pump gas, let's have a little more fun with this. Let's just say that you're going to put methanol in it. Now, if you do that, as it says here in the notes, the ethanol content is ignored because there is none. It's just neat methanol. Stoichiometric air fuel ratio and density are also ignored because the calculator in the background knows those values are. So you could leave it at that. Now let's say you want to do a custom fuel. I should have brought one up here. Give me a moment to bring up a custom fuel. Let's say VPMS 109. And we should get a data sheet here on their site, technical data sheet. And that data sheet is going to state the stoichiometric air fuel ratio and the density of the fuel, and both of those are required to get these numbers right. So where is it here? Stoich is 13.34, so we're going to enter that. And by the way, you can do this with any fuel, any component, as long as these two values are known, all the way up to straight nitromethane if you want to run 100% nitromethane and break a lot of parts. So we got stoich, Where is the density? It's probably right here in front of me. Also known as specific gravity, 0.7250. So we'll enter that. Okay, and now based on what we've done, it knows the flow of the stock injector at that fuel pressure. It knows what fuel was in it. And now knowing that it's got a new injector and a different fuel, it's going to make calculations to decide how much we should adjust the fuel tables in the ECU. So scroll back up to the top because it doesn't all fit on the screen. One of the things you're going to see here, well, many. The first is the pulse width factor. That's a multiplier that we're going to apply to all the fuel tables. We have injector latency, and essentially what that is how would I explain this best? Let's say that the ECU determines, ECU is engine control unit, determines we need a 10 millisecond pulse width to deliver the correct amount of fuel. Well, the injector might not deliver effectively 10 milliseconds worth of fuel. It may give you what is effectively, say, 9 milliseconds worth of fuel. That's because the injector has an offset value. In the DynoJet software, it's called latency, so we've used that same terminology. And that latency value varies with both pressure and voltage. So we've listed it here at 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, on up to 16 volts, the stock values. You're going to copy and paste those in there. I'll show you how in a minute. And then a minimum injector pulse width to keep the injector out of the deeply nonlinear operating range. So let me show you here. The pressure is set at 43.5 psi. Let's look at the injector latency at 14 volts. It's 0.893. So I'm just going to crank this all the way up to the top to 100 psi, and you'll see that the latency has jumped up to 1.098. We can drop it down to the low range. We see that it changes again. So you got to get this stuff right, and once you do, we have all the data to put into the ECU. Now, we've got 6 or 7 parameters here to work with, but we're actually going to correct 46, no, a little over 50 tables in the ECU based on some of this information. So I will move this over to the other screen and we'll get right to it. So let's start with the injector data. I've got a file open here for a stock Honda Talon. We're going to open up the fuel folder and we're going to go to, where is it? Here we go, injector settings. Haven't done this in a while. Injector latency. Now you'll see that the breakpoints here from the factory are 7, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. These are different than the values that we provide here. So the first thing I want you to do is click on this, this title here, module voltage. It allows you to adjust those values. So we're going to start right at the bottom. We've got 8 volts, 10 volts, 12 volts, 13, 14, that was already 14, and 16. And that's it, you're done. You can close out this window. So you can see these numbers have changed. They're colored now. The green indicates that the value is less than what was there. Red indicates it's more. Actually, that's backwards. Doesn't matter. The colors aren't really critical. Just note that they are, in fact, 8, 10, 12, 14, and 16, as in the calculator. And make sure that they're in the same order as well. You may be tempted to put 8 volts over here and 16 volts over here. It might still function correctly, but I've never tried it, and frankly, I don't want to find out the hard way. Okay, so let's start with 8 volts. Let's do this. Let me shrink this down a little bit. See if I can get it all on the screen. And whoops, well, that's not quite going to work. I'll just move it down here. Okay, so if I come over to 8 volts and just double click on this and then right click and copy, I can come back to this, left click and then paste. And let me make one more change here so I can get both on the screen at the same time. Let's see here, hang on a moment. All right, so we've got, let's move this one over here. Boy, it's almost like I've never done this before, huh? This is good enough. Okay, 10 volts again. Double click. It's highlighted. Copy using right click, or you could use Control-C on your keyboard. Back to this. Paste. And we're going to do the same for all the voltage points. 12 volts. Paste. Get our new values in here. Finally, 16 volts. And there we go. So that's taken care of. And move this over. Now we also have the minimum injector pulse width, which we need to enter in here. We'll do it the same way. We will copy and paste. And now we've done that. As far as the Honda ECU is determined, that's all it needs to know about the injector. And I guess it's worth noting that in most other ECUs, like the Bosch-based systems or any modern ECU, there's a lot more data that goes into this. And for that reason, we have an accurate model of the injector, and we don't have to modify all these other tables. But because the Honda system is not model-based, it's just a collection of pulse width tables, we have to go and modify all of those pulse width tables based on the change in flow requirements due to a different fuel, and also the fact that we've got a different injector, different fuel pressure. So let's get started on that. This is the fun part. 46 tables to go from here. So the nice thing about this is that a guy named Matt Wallace at DynoJet, who did the reverse engineering on all this, did a wonderful job with great attention to detail, and everything is labeled very clearly, and it makes this really, really easy. And man, I send this guy a text every once in a while out of the blue when I'm working with this stuff just to thank him for doing such a good job. Anyway, the first thing we want to look at is cranking fuel. And what we've got here is the injector pulse width during cranking, meaning, you're trying to start the vehicle, and it's a pulse width value based on temperature. So now is when we start to apply this pulse width factor. In this case, it's 0.441. Same thing. I'm going to copy and paste. Now, I'm going to put it down here in this box, which is a handy little tool that DynoJet offers. And now we've got that multiplication factor there. We're going to use that to apply to all of the pulse width tables in the ECU. So if I go up here in the top left corner and I select this blank box, it automatically selects every pulse width value in the software. So now that they're all selected, I'm going to hit multiply, and you can see that they've all been reduced. They've all been multiplied by 0.441. Now we also have the injector pulse width. We have A and B. I assume it's injector 1 and 2. I don't know for sure. Doesn't matter. Now you can see that they're still selected, but I want you to go through the step of clicking in this box every time to make sure that they're selected, that you've selected all the cells, or that you haven't mistakenly had too many selected because the window size changes. You'll see why that's important when we get into the transient fueling. So again, we've selected them all. By the way, you'll see they're in the reverse order in this table. I don't know why, but they are. And apply the multiplier. Now we're done, so we can close that out. So now our cranking fueling is correct. So we're going to move to the desired pulse width table. And there is one minor flaw in here. It's not a big deal. You'll notice that it lists cylinders 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, personally, I'd love to have a 4-cylinder Honda Talon, but they don't exist. So we've just got cylinder 1 and 2. You're going to ignore cylinders 3 and 4. And the other thing that happens, I've noticed, is that when I switch from cranking fuel to these tables, that my multiplier here has disappeared. So I'm going to grab it again by double-clicking, right-clicking, and then copy, in here and paste. So now I've got that dialed in again. We're going to do exactly the same thing except on the correct cylinder, cylinder number 1. Select the blank box up here. It's going to select all of the cells, hit multiply. In fact, if I change this to 2D, actually you won't see it because it scales the whole thing. That's fine. We'll move to cylinder number 2. Note that our multiplier is still here. Same thing, we're going to multiply. You see all the values are much smaller. We're going to go down. Now that's by the way, that's the alpha N mode, and that is the portion of the map that determines fueling based on throttle position. Alpha N is an old term. I think that Bosch came up with it, I don't know how many years ago, eons ago. And then we're going to go to speed density mode. Now speed density mode is the fuel table that's based on manifold pressure, and the system switches back and forth between the two, so we have to correct both tables. So again, we select cylinder number 1, select all the cells, hit multiply, shrinks down the values, because of course, even though we're running a fuel that requires greater fuel flow, our injectors are much bigger, so the numbers get smaller, same thing. And the nice thing that'll happen here is you'll see that any values that are other than stock are highlighted or bolded. Okay, so that was the quick, easy stuff. shouldn't have to do much from here, right? We've changed the fuel tables, we've changed the cranking fuel. What else is there? Well, unfortunately, your Honda Talon has the most complicated transient fueling system that I've ever seen. It works okay, but we've got a lot of tables to correct. But again, we make it simple with these multipliers. So, and by the way, this is one of the reasons this is so critical to have this data correct on the Talon, because not only do you need to scale your basic fuel tables based on what fuel you're using or what fuel injector or what fuel pressure, but you have to correct all of these 40 some transient fueling tables. And if you've ever driven a Talon or been around a Talon that had larger injectors where things were not properly characterized and they didn't have this tool to use because we're the only ones that have it or the only ones that offer it, throttle response can be kind of messy. Drivability can really suck. And getting all of these correct makes sure that the vehicle runs the way that it's supposed to. And again, you can make these big changes. And like here, you could literally take a stock vehicle, put the bigger injectors in it, drain the tank, fill it full of methanol, put all these values in, and go drive it and enjoy your extra 8 to 10% more horsepower from the methanol. It really is that simple. And again, you would want to go back and fine tune. When you do this, you'll find the system runs a little bit rich everywhere, especially at park throttle, but it's safe and the throttle response is good, and you'll have a good running vehicle, and you can do some fine tuning to correct it from there. Okay, so enough of that. Throttle tip-in enrichment. Now you've really got to pay attention here because we want to change everything that's called a pulse width, right? So if we look at this first folder here, it says tip-in additive pulse. Now you click on that. There's not a pulse width value. You can see here with the values in throttle degrees. We're going to ignore that. Pay attention to this table, tip-in additive pulse width. Everything called a pulse width is what we need to change. And again, because Matt did such a tremendous job on this, it makes things real easy for us. So we break down into the subcategories. The first one is in gear, with throttle closed. Now I want you to open up decay because there are pulse width values for decay. And this is the rate at which the acceleration enrichment tapers off. I won't bother you with that, but I notice here our value is gone again, and that's okay. It's just, we're only going to have to put this in 3 times. So 0.441. Same routine. Click on it, hit multiply. This one says pulse width. Click on it, hit multiply. And I want you to pay attention to one thing here that's going to become important later. We have very, very low resolution in these tables because the values are so small. We have a value of 0.009, and we're going to multiply it by 0.441. We don't have enough digits here to get the exact correct value. In terms of drivability, it doesn't matter much, but it can cause some problems later if you're making multiple changes. And for that reason, I always want you to start with stock transient values, and I'll go into detail later as we make further changes. So we've chosen all the cells, multiply, and we're just going to keep doing this, and you're going to get bored, but I want you to pay attention. Remember to click that top left cell to select all of them. We go down, we can ignore multipliers because those are just what they say, they're multipliers. We don't want to change that. We just want to change pulse widths. Here we've got a whole bunch, same thing. Why did that disappear again? It doesn't normally do that. Sorry, it's just doing it because I'm shooting a video, that's why. It wants to mess up my video. Same thing, multiply, select it, multiply, new table, a whole lot of this, over and over and over again. It's easy, but it is somewhat tedious. Although our Talon is used for fuel testing, and I do this several times a week, sometimes several times a day as we change to different fuels. So it's not that big of a deal. You just got to pay attention. Make sure that you correct everything that's labeled pulse width, and everything will go your way. Just don't get in a hurry or get sloppy. So now we've got another category here, in gear with the throttle already open. We need to look at decay because, again, we have pulse width values here. Now, this is why I said I want you to click on this one every time, because if not, you're going to be in a hurry, not paying attention, and not realize that only half of these cells are selected. So make that correction. I may edit all this out of the video. It's just so time consuming and tedious. Now, minimum events, that's not a pulse width. I don't actually know what it is. I'm not sure anybody knows what it is, but it's in there and it's all zero, so you're going to leave it alone because it's not labeled pulse width. Again, we got another pulse width table. Let's see, down to the next one, more pulse width tables. This just keeps going on and on and on. And by the way, if you guys think that this is tedious and somewhat of a pain in the ass, I have two things to say to that. One is, imagine what we had to go through here to reverse engineer all this stuff and figure out what did what. And imagine how poorly your vehicle is going to run if you don't get this stuff right. You know, you can make good power on the dyno and find that your throttle response is absolutely horrible. And the extra, let's just say 20 minutes or a half an hour you're going to put into this is going to be well worth your time. We've got another category, which is neutral. Again, we have some decay values we have to correct. Select the whole table. Like I said, that one could have bit me or you. Make our corrections. Now again, we've got another one here. It's not labeled pulse width. It's labeled minimum events. So we don't need to worry about that. We can ignore the multipliers folder. Although, look, if you're being careful, it's not a big deal to open it up and realize that there's nothing you need to do there. It's better to be diligent and pay attention. And by the way, the reason I'm harping on that is occasionally I'll be making a change, switching to a different fuel, maybe to a different injector for some of the testing that we're doing, and maybe I rush through this, and the vehicle runs pretty good, except it has an odd drivability quirk somewhere, and I come back and I realize I missed one of these tables or screwed it up, or clicked on multiply twice. Yeah, I've done that too. So just take your time. It's not that big of a deal. Now, these next four values, at least in this calibration, are all zeros. There's no point in multiplying by zero because zero multiplied by anything is still zero. But I want you to check them all anyway in case your stock calibration is different. It says pulse width. Take a look at it. If it's got a zero, you don't need to screw with it. What do we have here? More stuff we don't need. Late event pulse width. Let's see. Yep, we got to correct all of these. Again and again and again. I should have some dancing girls in the background. Give you guys something to look at while I'm doing this. But we're almost done, at least with the basics. And then I'll give some further explanation. Okay, so now it's time for me to check and determine what I might have forgotten. So I'll do this by looking at the main categories. Everything under fueling is critical, of course. So cranking fuel has a pulse width table. This other stuff is not critical because it does not contain pulse width tables. And you can use this as a guide to know which folders you need to open and correct and which you don't. We took care of the injector settings, the latency, the minimum injector pulse width, and then all from memory, 44 or 46 tables here that had to be corrected. So we can back all that stuff off and essentially see what we changed. And by the way, another thing you can do if you're not familiar with this is you can open a stock file and use the compare function. That's good when you make a mistake like I do on occasion. I can use the compare function and say, oh man, I screwed that up. I missed that one, or double click to multiply or something like that. So anyway, now that we've done this, we're done. You literally could have gone out to the vehicle, installed the bigger injectors, our return style fuel kit, pumped it full of methanol and driven it, and everything's great. Okay, so that covers the basics of switching your system from stock injectors to larger aftermarket injectors, but that's not the only use for this calculator. There may be a time when you've got, let's say you've got 1050s in the car already, our return style fuel system or our FDM, and you want to change fuels. Maybe you're using E98 and you want to switch to methanol, and it's a pretty finely tuned calibration. Your tuner spent a lot of work on it, so you don't want to make these changes to the stock calibration and then have to retune all that stuff. You just want to account for the change in injector flow rate or fuel flow requirement based on your new fuel. Or maybe you just change to a bigger injector. Maybe you've got high boost and the 1050s weren't enough. You need to step up to a 1300. Maybe you're right on the edge. You need a little more fuel pressure. All of these things can be accounted for in here. So again, you're going to start by defining your current system. So we're going to say that you've got 1050s in it right now at 3 bar. And why didn't that take? because I'm shooting a video. That's why it didn't take. Right. So you've got 1050s in it, a 3 bar, and you're running, let's say VP E98, right? Which is 98% ethanol and 2% gasoline. So just change this to 98. This is what you've got in the system right now. And by the way, you can't buy E100, at least not in this country, because E100 is just straight alcohol, and the government's afraid that you might drink it and enjoy yourself or not pay the appropriate taxes. So they put 2% denaturant in there, which is gasoline typically, so it tastes like shit, so you won't drink it. Unless you're really drunk, you might drink it anyway. So that's what you've got in the car right now. 1050s, 3 bar return style system, E98, and you want to do something simple like just change to methanol. So I've got these values in here already for the current configuration and the new configuration. And we have a new pulse width factor, which is 1.298, because you're going to need 30% more fuel flow, or 29.8% more fuel flow. So you go into the settings here, cranking fuel, you want to check both of those, multiply those by 1.3. Your desired pulse width tables, both in alpha N mode and speed density mode. So now you've applied that correction factor to the tables that your tuner worked so hard on. Now, you might be tempted in the throttle tip-in enrichment table to simply apply that multiplier again. But as I explained before, the issue with that is that we've got some small errors in some of those tables due to lack of resolution. Every time you apply a multiplier to that table, you're going to increase the amount of error that you have there. So what I would prefer for you to do to get the most accurate results is go back to stock values and then generate a new multiplier to correct those values. So in this case, what we would do is we would first apply our multiplier of 1.298 to all of these tables. We would convert these back to stock, which unfortunately I already did. Let me show you how to do that. Let's just say that this table right here we wanted to convert back to stock. After you select it, right click on it, set restore to stock, and it changes all the values back to stock. So what you're going to do down here under throttle tip-in enrichment is click on that. And by the way, you don't want that expanded when you do it. You want it just like that. Right click it, restore all items back to stock. And by the way, that takes a minute or two. It's kind of time consuming, but wait for it to finish. Don't worry that it doesn't happen right away. As soon as it's done, you'll notice the value is no longer in bold. Then go back here and go back to your stock arrangement, which was a Talon injector at 49.8 psi, or was it 48.9? I don't remember. I'll let you figure that out. So you've done that. You've gone back to a stock system. Again, 10% fuel. And now you get a new multiplier, which is 0.869. Now apply that multiplier to all of the throttle tip-in enrichment tables. Now, in the case that your tuner, in the course of doing your calibration, or probably if you're watching this, you are the tuner, has modified the throttle tip-in enrichment tables, then you'll just want to apply the main multiplier, knowing that there may be some minor errors there in the decay values. But in most cases, if you use the method that I described, you'll find you don't have to mess with the transient fueling at all. So again, what we're doing is we're generating one multiplier that defines our two systems that have the same injector, same fuel system, but just different fuel that we apply to the main fuel tables, your cranking tables and your main pulse width tables. And then we're going to start fresh again with stock transient values and correct those for the new fuel configuration. So hopefully that's clear. If it's not, send us a message. We'll probably post this, leave a question in the comments. We'll help get you sorted out. So the short story is this will make your life real easy after you step through all this. I think everybody that does this is always surprised at how well the vehicle runs after the fact. And so there you are. We provide the tools, which is the bigger injectors, the upgraded fuel system, the tools you need to make more power. And then this is in addition to that, it allows you to make all the corrections required in the ECU so you don't spend a week chasing your tail, or worse, which is unfortunately common, just simply lowering your standards. You make good power on the dyno and the car doesn't drive well. We don't want that. We don't want that happening with our product. When you put our product in your car, we want you to have not just good power, but we want it to start cleanly under all conditions. We want all your compensations to be correct. And all of this is required to make that happen. It's relatively simple. So thanks for watching this long, rambling video. Watch it twice, 3 times if you need to. Get it right. If you get it right, everything is going to work a whole lot better than you would expect. And let me see what else. Thanks for your time. Thanks for buying our products. Have a good day.